The next speaker, where is he? Is John. What's your current title, John? What's your job title? Energy Projects Manager for the Greater South East Energy Hub. Got it right. And John has previously worked with Suffolk Climate Change Partnership. Yeah. Anybody else I should mention? Is that good enough? So John, from my perspective, John is the go-to energy man, particularly on renewables. So I follow him on Twitter, and every day he's amazing amount of information coming from John. So he really knows his stuff, absolutely. So, you know, he's the man I would turn to. I did yesterday, and he gave me some factoids for today, so much appreciated, John. So, John, over to you. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for inviting me to speak here this morning. It's great to be back in Suffolk speaking to you today. I live in Suffolk still. I live just north of Ipswich, and I did spend nearly 10 years working with Baber and Mid-Suffolk through the Suffolk Climate Change Partnership as a community advisor. So a few familiar faces in the room, and worked on community buildings and parishes over that time period. I now work for a team called the Greater South East Energy Hub. It's actually quite a similar job, just a broader geography. We're funded by the government to work with local authorities and communities to accelerate the delivery of local energy projects of all shapes and sizes. And I'll be talking specifically about the support we offer for communities through that. I was just thinking when Phil had his slides up about the net zero plans through to 2050, how much time is that really? And I was thinking back, well, how 2050 is 30 years in the future. What was 30 years ago? And that's the big event I can remember from back then, 1990, was that penalty shootout in the World Cup final. So actually now, Gaza crying and all that, that's further away in time than 2050. So just to kind of put it in some perspective, that's how much time we've now got. It's time to get on and start planning. Okay. So I thought I'd just start off just by showing this demonstration here. I've pulled out some data about where we're using fossil fuels at the moment in Baber and Mid-Suffolk. I've got the data here for Baber. So you can see, obviously being a rural area, people need to drive. Transport fuel makes quite a big chunk of our energy use still. Petrol is actually, you can see the charts there. The blue line on that top graph is 2005, and the orange line is 2018. So you can actually see petrol use has actually risen slightly over that time period in Baber. Gas use dropped slightly, electricity dropped slightly, as well as heating oil. But those are the four prominent uses of fossil fuels there. You'll notice coal's not on there. We don't actually use very much coal in the UK anymore. A few barbecues, but not like we used to with power stations and everything. So that's been the big progress over that time period. We've made some really big changes in the electricity sector, getting coal off the system through renewables and gas. And you can see there carbon emissions has dropped about 25% since 2005 to 2018. And life doesn't feel too much different in terms of back then to now. So we can make some pretty hefty cuts in our carbon emissions without too much difficulty. That achievement in the carbon reduction has primarily come through the energy, electricity sector. And in terms of local energy, previously, getting coal off that was the domain of people who ran power stations, the offshore wind farms. It was quite a discrete group of people that made that change happen. Whereas the next big phase of decarbonisation that has to involve, as Councillor Fleming said earlier, everyone in this room. It's what we use to heat our homes, how we drive. It's going to get quite personal. So whereas the first phase of decarbonisation was a small group of people, the next phase has to involve everybody. So as community leaders, we need to start engaging our neighbours and our communities and start planning how we're going to shift these chunks of energy away from petrol and oil and gas onto clean energy like electricity. So Phil set up it really nicely. Community-owned renewable energy is what we'll be talking about now. the government's plans that were announced this week really set in stone the kind of overall strategy for the country, which is really to generate as much low-carbon electricity as we possibly can through renewables and nuclear and other sources, to then use that power to then decarbonise other sectors like heating and transport. So the first thing to do is see what opportunities we have to generate electricity locally. This picture here, some of you may recognise it. This is actually Nayland School here in Baber. And this was, in fact, the UK's first community-owned solar energy project. That's quite an accolade, I think. So back in 2011, when the feed-in tariff was first introduced, a group of parents that were associated with the school recognised it had a great rooftop for solar energy. So they clubbed together, they formed a village energy cooperative. They approached the school and the county council to say, well, can we fund a solar array on the school and give the electricity for free to the school? And that's how it happened. A group of about 20 households in Nayland all co-invested in this solar energy array and got it installed on the school. And in fact, that instigated the council, once they saw the opportunity with solar energy, they then did their own internal programme, which saw another 90 schools in the county follow through with solar installations that was instigated, I would say, by this one in Nayland. So it shows the power of community lead, showing the initiative and have the ripple effect it can have on other parties. I think that's also got a biomass boiler, that school as well. So at the Greater South East Energy Hub, we run something called the Rural Community Energy Fund, which is a government-funded grant scheme which is there for parish councils, town councils and community energy groups to get some extra resources to engage. Like a lot of them are probably going to be volunteers doing it in their spare time, and some of these projects can be quite complex. So our grant fund enables you to draw in professional consultancy support. We offer initially a stage 1 feasibility grant, so you can engage professional energy consultants, solicitors and all that, who will do the kind of technical analysis of what renewables are suitable for your parish or your location. They'll advise you on the sort of appropriate legal structure to set up, like a community benefit society or a community interest company. And they'll do the working out what's the grid connections like, what sort of planning permission do you need to proceed. That can then be followed up with a stage 2 development grant where we can provide further funding to help you do more detailed studies. Like if you're doing a solar farm, you might need to look at the ecology or the flooding situation, that sort of thing. But yeah, we're there to get you to the point where you can start to finance that project through a community share offer or getting some ethical investment for a project. So a few case studies of how we've used that funding to date. We've now allocated over £1 million through that fund across the whole southeast of England. This is one project I really like, which is a solar farm in Berkshire. I don't know if you're familiar with the term a fuel allotment charity. It's something that exists in a few parishes. And they're actually quite historic. The fuel allotment charity was, they were set up at the time of enclosures. So when common land was enclosed, a bit of land was often kept back for the parish to use. And they literally used it as a fuel allotment. They would grow trees on it and other crops, which they would harvest every year. And they would distribute that wood fuel to the poor of the village. And this is a fuel allotment charity in Berkshire, still owned that land from several hundred years ago, and they'd used it for other purposes, but still with that charitable mission to bring in income to offer a local benefit. But we've actually given them some grant money to see, can they use that land now to put a solar farm up? So rather than growing trees, they're now going to use that sunlight to generate renewable electricity, sell it to the grid, sell it to local customers, and they're going to use the profits they make from that renewable energy to then, keep their original charitable purpose going. They'll use it to support the fuel poor of their village. So they've got 20 acres of land. They don't need all of that. They're going to use about 2 hectares of it for a solar farm, so still plenty of space for greenery and wildlife. So at the moment they've got stage 1 funding. We're currently working with a few organisations to see if they can get some bridge finance to bring construction and talk to people about getting a power purchase agreement to buy the electricity. The comment that was made earlier about, if we're going to see a lot of these, that community benefit that Phil talked about, the government's plan is to have carbon-free electricity in the UK by 2035. So that is going to mean a lot more renewable energy, a lot of wind power, but also more solar power. So there's plenty of opportunity still for more power on rooftops, but we will see more solar farms come forward in fields and our landscapes. So I think it's really crucial for communities to be involved in that process and actually to share ownership of these infrastructure projects that they'll be living with. And you can actually see once you do have that community involvement and ownership, all the profits that come from that solar farm can be retained locally to subsidise other local services. So some communities chose to use their surplus to support food banks during the COVID crisis. Others are looking to fund rural bus services and electric buses. And it's also just a good way for people to invest their savings and pensions, to see it being put to good use for the next generation. So community solar farms is something we're keen to support going forward. The other area we've been supporting is renewable heating. So this is a project you may have heard of. It's got quite a bit of press. They're building it at the moment. Village of Swaffham Prior, just over the border in Cambridgeshire near Newmarket. They're actually a village quite common at Baber and Mid-Suffolk ones. They're off the gas grid. They're on heating oil and LPG and electric. So the parish council there, they'd done a project where they'd got a community land trust to build some social housing. And then they thought, well, can we use this kind of community building approach in other areas? And they looked at this question, how can we get the whole village off heating oil? So that, again, they used the Rural Community Energy Fund to do a study of how they could set up a village heating network. So you can see a map of it there. There's a field just on the edge of the village where they're going to build an energy centre, which will incorporate boreholes for ground source heat pumps. There'll be an air source heat pump there and a solar farm connecting into it to provide power and heat to supplement the costs. And then they're currently building a heat main for the village. So from that energy centre, insulated heating pipes will run down the street, and each house will then be able to connect into it using some kind of interface unit. So they'll get rid of their oil tanks, they'll get rid of their boilers, and they'll be able to interface with this communal heat supply. And it's been designed to be a very similar cost to what people were paying for their oil anyway. And I think, if you've had to order oil recently, it's gone up the same as gas has. So doing it this way, you're insulating your community from those kind of volatile price hikes as well. Another version of that renewable heating, we've also seen projects that are looking to supply heat to a single large energy user. So this is a project we supported in the Thames Valley, just west of London. So Maidenhead Energy Group. You can see the River Thames is just running through the picture at the back there. This is a leisure centre that's just next to the river. We gave them some funding to see could they use the River Thames as a heat source to supply heat via a heat pump to the leisure centre. They've ended up actually going through a ground source heat pump because I think there were roads and other things in the way. But similar premise, the community group will own and operate the heat pump and will have a heat supply contract with the leisure centre. So the leisure centre hasn't had to do any of the work themselves or find the money to build it. So they're partnered with the community energy group. They're going to raise the finance like Nayland did with people from the area. I think they've just raised about 150, 200,000 pounds to build it out. And again, it's an example of how people can club together to solve an energy issue for a community facility like this. And another variation of renewable heating. So if we are going to be talking about phasing gas boilers out by 2035, they're actually also talking about phasing fossil fuel heating in off-gas grid areas sooner, because oil and LPG are more carbon-intensive fuels. So there was a consultation launched this week where they're going to look at phasing out oil and LPG actually by 2026 for new sales. So helping rural communities understand their options for domestic heating is going to be really important over the next few years. Certainly recommend using some of the grant funds that are coming out, like there's going to be a home upgrade scheme, home upgrade grant, which will be available for fuel-poor households in off-gas grid areas to get insulation and heating systems. Some other people in our team will be managing that. But there could also be community approaches to individual heat pumps as well. So we've worked with a few villages I know in Suffolk's running a solar together bulk buy scheme at the moment. So could a similar proposed premise operate for domestic heat pumps? A few years ago when I was working in Suffolk, we ran a trial project with Cookley and Walpole Parish Council where we worked with a few heat pump and biomass boiler installers. Say, if we can guarantee you 10, 15 installs in this village this heating season, can you offer us a discount? And through that kind of community scale organisation, the installers offered a 15% discount off their normal installation prices as if it had been a one-off. So yeah, we're very keen to see if there's other ways of pooling that community level support and education to help rural householders make this transition from what they're used to other forms of heat pumps. Okay, I think that's the main thing. There's my contact details there if you want to get in touch. I'll be around for the panel session earlier. But yeah, just really want to emphasise that point that this next phase really has to be, well, every parish is going to have their own plan and action. So hopefully see a wave of action sweep up the River Stour and up the A140, and we're here to help. Thank you.